Well, it's been a while. Let's see how that Reddit post is doing. Sounds about right. Alright, hi. So you stuck with tanking and need further information, huh? At least the high mind that is my viewer base thinks so. Alright, let's lay down the very basics of what to expect. By now, I expect you to understand the basic names of your skills, mechanics like stacking, tank busters and such, so I won't go on a side explanation for them. If you still don't get a specific thing, feel free to ask so in the comments, and I will answer them once I have time. We also won't be covering how to deal damage as each tank, as that would take way too long, and I will be covering each tank in their individual guide in the future.
Yes! Hey, I just got my license!
Hey, I'm getting mine next.
Hey, I doubt it!
Got those so far? Good. Now here's what we will be covering in order: how to mitigate efficiently and why, what to expect from your allies including your co-tank, and getting most from your movement. Let's start with how to mitigate effectively and why. Ever did a boss fight where everyone else died and the tank was just like... That's only possible if you are mitigating correctly or just spamming clemency on yourself, which is extremely boring. But if you are mitigating responsibly, you can pretty much require little to no healing and even solo any content that doesn't have any DPS check, or stack marker, or tank buster spam. As for how to mitigate, it depends on if you are tanking a boss or multiple enemies in a long dungeon pool, or if you're tanking an in-game content like an extreme or savage. Let's start with tanking a boss. Every boss in Final Fantasy has a predetermined script it follows. If you ever read a boss timeline, that is a version without auto attacks. Aside from the variation of which mechanic the boss might pick next and location of the said mechanic, everything else is predetermined, including how many auto attacks you will be hit with. If you're an absolute nerd, you can just sit down and put a timeline on where to put what mitigation to maximize every bit of your mitigations, but that is really not necessary and extremely nerdy. It's much easier and time efficient to make a very simple list of questions for yourself and go off of that. Are you gonna be using your invulnerability for the tank buster or cheese any mechanics if it's savage or extreme? If you're invulning the tank buster, does it come up in type for every tank buster? If yes, you can just use your mitigations on rotation whenever the boss is auto-attacking you. Pretty simple. If the answer is a no and you need to mitigate the tank buster, figure out when the said tank buster is and how well it needs to be mitigated. Most tank busters either need to be kitchen synced or just need your big 2-minute mitigation and a short mitigation. If you need to kitchen sync, only use your mitigations for auto attacks if the tank buster is more than 90 seconds away, and always save your 2-minute mid cooldown, just in case you miss time anything to give yourself a little bit of a fighting chance in case things go wrong. Short side note here, most tanks clip into their GCDs when trying to kitchen sync and lose damage. To not do that, let's take a look at your cooldowns. As you can see, most things line up perfectly with your GCD speed. Before a tank buster is even about to happen, simply press your rampart, wait 2 GCDs, press your 2-minute cooldown, wait 2 GCDs again, then press any flavor and short cooldown you want to add to it. This will allow you to use those GCDs for any other mechanic or attack that might hit before the tank buster, alongside with any regen or buffs that your healers might put on you, allowing you to double up on it. Which brings us to our next short topic, mitigating raid wides. There is just one thing to keep in mind when mitigating a raid wide: how long until the next one hits. If it will hit immediately after the first one, you can hold your mitigation right up until it goes off, which will allow you to cover multiple raid wides with one mitigation. Keep in mind this only goes for percent mitigations, not shields. So if you use Shake It Off, those are going to be disappearing at the slightest sign of a raid wide. If the next raid wide is, let's say, exactly in 59 seconds after the first one, you will want to use your reprisal at least 1 second earlier because it's on a 60-second cooldown. And the earlier you use it, the easier it will be used for the next raid wide. While it may sound niche, this comes up very often in some endgame raids, where your cooldown will be just a few seconds away while another raid wide is about to hit. And one last thing about mitigation, or rather Final Fantasy in general, that I couldn't fit anywhere else: things in Final Fantasy are calculated when they are cast, not when they hit or linger. This is important in the case of regeneration or delayed healing you are received during Rampart, which increases healing received when upgraded, so if you do go to regen, using Rampart after will not increase regen. Same applies to debuffs. If your group got hit by a bleed damage over time, and you use your reprisal or raid wide mitigation, unless it's a shield, it will not reduce the damage people take, as how much damage it does was calculated when it was cast. This is most commonly observed in World of Darkness's final boss, Cloud of Darkness, where every single auto attack she does will apply a bleed damage over time on you, but if you use a mitigation afterwards, you will not get hit by a bleed again. Because your mitigation is up, it is supposed to do less damage per tick than the previous bleed that was applied, therefore it will not be placed on you. Now let's get to what to expect from your allies, if they are competent that is. This community is filled with plenty, let's say, bottom of the barrel gamers, where you will question how they even managed to download the game, let alone how they got as far as they did in the game. You will run into people who will use single target on a group of 10 plus enemies, healers who won't press a single damage button or raid buff even if they have them, and tanks who will not use a single mitigation and use provoke on a cooldown when there's a co-tank. So if someone is not doing what they should be doing, you don't have to tell me, I know. I had to experience a 70-minute run of a dungeon that lasts 30 minutes on average while writing the script in middle of it. So it made me think very unsavory acts. With that, let's cover your fellow co-tanks first. You will run into them when doing anything above a light party, and while it's not a hard-coded rule, warrior tends to be the best choice for a main tank as they have a less busy opener, and while absolutely unnecessary, their 2-minute cooldown does damage back if they get hit by a physical attack. If you know anyone obsessed with that 55 potency per reflect, notify your nearest mental asylum. Reason why you want a warrior to main tank is that they have little to double weave that hits enemies, so they can move in and out of max melee range without having to worry too much about using an ability to do damage. Paladin, also the thing that I hate, has the exact same thing on a bigger scale. While you do absolutely laughable damage in comparison to other tanks, haha, you do have a ranged phase and one range attack as part of your rotation. So getting out of melee range and moving the boss is significantly less of a problem. Unlike those two, Dark Knight and Gunbreaker have a very busy double weave spam of a rotation, so they would rather not have to move the boss around. However, Dark Knight does now have a 2-minute attack that actually does give him one attack where you can be out of max melee range. In my personal preference, I would say the order of tanking is Warrior, Paladin, Dark Knight, and Gunbreaker, but again, personal preference. Talk with your tanks. Coming up to your healers, there really is very little to know aside from a very small distinct information. White Mage's AoE attacks stun, so when wall-to-wall pulling, they will grant you 10 seconds of free time where you can save your mitigations. In theory, you're more likely to either wait for them to use it and take a lot of unmitigated damage if they are new, or use your mitigations just to have them be worthless as they immediately start doing their job, and making you lose damage as a Dark Knight because your TBN won't be popping. Aside from that, they have access to an instant full heal, so if they are just not healing you for a bit until you are next to death's door, that is why. Aside from White Mage's gimmicks, expect a lot of potent healing from all three of the healers and mild mitigations from Sage. Their kit is more dedicated towards mitigating instead of a lot of heals, so take extra care with a Sage as your only healer. You might need to mitigate a little bit extra. And for your DPS players, you can lump them into 3 categories. You have melee DPS, which needs to be behind or on the side of the boss while being near the boss. Also, Red Mage also has a melee phase, keep that in mind. So giving them space to do their job and making the boss as stationary as possible is a great way to earn their gratitude. However, in endgame content, they will be killing themselves and you to get one more hidden. You also have casters, Red Mage is in a different part, and range physical DPS. These two don't need to be inside the boss's nostrils to contribute to damage, so they shouldn't be getting in your way. Extra emphasis on shouldn't. And finally, you have the DPS players who have no idea what they are doing and you will run into on a regular basis, which you will quickly notice after doing whatever fight it is you are doing a couple times simply by looking at the boss's health bar. This is important for one simple reason, not for you to trash talk them. They most likely will be dying very often, which eats up healers' resources and makes the group more vulnerable to stack mechanics, and B, doing little to no damage which extends the fight timer by a lot. So you should be trying to mitigate even more efficiently or be more frugal with the mitigations if everyone is full health and alive, so you can save them for the eventual stack marker with 6 people alive on half health. If everyone else is completely incompetent to the point where you can find a saint sighing in pain, you are welcome to try and kill the boss alone once everyone perishes if the boss is not spamming stack markers and tank busters. While this entire section sounds like a gross oversimplification of the jobs, you do not need to know every little detail of every job to do well. They are homogenized enough to the point where knowing what a job in general is expected to do is more than well enough, with the only exception of Red Mage, who doesn't need to get into melee range on their reopeners, and occasionally as well when they have gauge. Now let's get to the most overlooked and important part, getting the most out of your movement. This section will apply to every job in the game with the exception of auto attacks, so even if you are not a tank, pay attention. There are 2 types of things that deal damage in Final Fantasy. When you press an attack ability or GCD, you do damage. However, You also do damage in set intervals that change with your skill speed by just hitting the enemy with your weapon every 3 seconds by default. If you're hopping in and out of max melee range non-stop just to look fancy, even without dropping a GCD, you are still technically losing damage, unless you are also in sync with your 3-second window as well. So for a rule of thumb, more time you spend at least at max melee, the more damage you will do. This is only relevant if you do not have to move the boss somewhere important. Do not wait for a non-GCD auto attack, I'm serious, do not, and get hit by a mechanic. It is not worth it. You will be forced to put on another piece of the clown outfit. By me, I will teleport right next to you, you will put it on. Coming up to something far more important for overall damage, keeping up your GCDs rolling while moving a boss or going out of max melee. You can min-max this for fights if you are an absolute nerd by adding enough skill speed to always make it line up properly, but you are playing a tank, stop being a nerd. Just follow these 3 simple steps. If you are moving out of the way of a mechanic, try to stay in melee range. The biggest example of this is if 2 sets of AoEs appear one after another and cover the entire melee range. Move to the second AoE first, then move to the first once it disappears to keep perfect uptime. If there are no space to stay in melee range, try to line it up in a way where you use a GCD, move out, and move back in before your next GCD time. This will marginally increase your DPS in a no uptime happy boss. If you need to move the boss somewhere, pretend you are doing the second step. Use a GCD, move out and make the boss follow you. Go back in to land the next GCD, go back out. If done fast enough, boss will barely stop and you will get a lot more damage done than just spamming your range attack. The next important thing with movement is gap closers. These don't just put you right next to the boss as much as they look like they do, they also cancel any current force movement. With proper timing, it's completely possible to cancel out a knockback without needing to use arm's length. They can also be used to zoom along with the boss when it's moving from one side of the arena to the other. This can be used to not drop a GCD even when the boss is running around. One important thing to keep in mind, however, is how the gap closer actually works behind the scenes. Gap closer has 3 stages. 1. You are on where you were as the animation is cast. 2. You are literally every fucking where between where you will land and where you started for a singular tick. 3. You arrive on the spot. This means for a single tick in the game, you can be hit by every AoE between where you cast it and where you will land. Here's a kill up of my ninja killing the entire raid by timing his own AoE to hit literally everyone.
Oh my fucking god, I am...
And finally, one last thing you can use your movement for is moving between where the boss is and where the boss will be. Many fights have the boss dash back to middle or some predetermined location to do a mechanic. If you couldn't or shouldn't move the boss to where it's going to, but the boss is close enough to where it's going to go that you can just stand in max melee in bot situations, you can just go and stand there as long as there are no cleaving attacks coming from the boss. This will both alleviate the problem of clipping into your GCD by sheer luck and having your auto attack not go off. But that's about all I can think of that a tank should know about before or a little time after dipping their toes into higher end content like Extremes or Savage. While they may feel like journalist advice, I can't exactly go undercover boss number 72's 5th attack pattern location to take no loss damage pattern without making this video longer than the queue to Ballman quicksands. If you have any questions or just want to help me farm engagement so more people gets this video recommended so you get better tanks in your games, you can do so below. If you want to support me, you can always subscribe and like the video or go wild and watch and subscribe to me on Twitch. That's all until the next video. Peace!